Starting with the eyes, I do a very rough outline and then kind of draw in the little pupil area. Now there's a lot of highlights happening, so I make sure I leave room for that. I also incorporate a mixture of greens, orange, and a little bit of some yellows in there, as well as a light blue into the highlighted area. That way it gets a nice blend. Now the teardrop shape at the end, it's kind of more of a skin tone color or like a rosy pink color, just to incorporate that more realistic lifelike look. And then the other eye, since it's kind of not really facing the same direction, there's not much to it. You just kind of try to draw what you see as much as possible and make sure you include some of those colors. Then continuing on to the actual hair, there is a lot going on in this hair, so I use a lot of different colors. As you can tell, I'm using some peach tones as well as some browns and a little bit of some orange. So it's really important to make sure you're incorporating a variety of colors as best as possible, because it really does make or break your portrait. I found that drawing this dachshund was actually not too hard, but it was just a little bit difficult just because there was quite a variety of different colors and different textures happening in this between the head, the ear, and then the rest of the body was just so different and yet the same from one another. So I ended up incorporating a lot of layers just to make sure I was building up enough saturation as well as enough variety. And if you haven't seen one of my videos before, I always talk about drawing in the same direction as the fur that you see, so that's super important. Now I just used a little bit of some mineral spirit oil on that paintbrush just to really smooth out everything. So what that does is it applies a little bit of some oil on top of the waxy coating that the color pencils use, and it just blends it out a little bit more. That way you can apply more colors afterwards, and what that'll do is kind of create a more saturated look as well as a little bit more sharper look as well. So once you start building up enough layers, you can really start to see all the nice details. Now I am using a light pale blue color to kind of incorporate some of the highlighted areas, because having a nice contrast between the cool tones and the warm tones just really helps make the portrait look a little bit more alive, because not one animal just looks like it has a flat color going on. So there is definitely a lot of colors being reflected from the environment within the actual animal fur. So it is really important to incorporate a variety of colors because of that. It's been a while since I've actually enjoyed it, like thoroughly had a good challenge and enjoyed a pet portrait, because I draw so many different pet portraits that a lot of the time I end up drawing same or similar breeds. So it was really nice to have a good challenge like this, because I haven't really drawn wiener dogs in a long time. So this is probably ultimately my second wiener dog that I've ever drawn before, which is crazy because I've been doing this for about 6 years. So it really was a lot of fun, and I loved the coloring that was happening in this fur. It really just, it's a nice tone, and I think that me playing around with the different colors that I could use just ultimately made this portrait look even more realistic, because I was able to apply a variety as well as making sure that it was all nice and saturated as well as blended together. So when you're drawing smaller portraits like this, there's a lot of the tooth of the paper that shows through. Now that tooth of the paper is that white breakage that's coming through, so it kind of looks like a sketch instead of a final portrait if you don't apply enough layers. If that's happening to you, don't worry. What you need to do is just pretty much keep going with your portrait. Now, if you have a piece of drawing paper that you're using that does not allow you to apply enough layers, I suggest finding thicker paper, such as some sort of like watercolor paper. It could be hot pressed or cold pressed, but I highly suggest more of a hot press watercolor paper. And what that'll do is it'll allow you to apply enough layers without damaging the paper. You just want to be mindful about that tooth of the paper coming through. So make sure that you're building it up enough layers, and then kind of using a little bit more of those blending techniques as you're going through it. And then you'll start to see that nice waxy coating being applied afterwards instead of just more this sketch look. So you can see in this ear on the left hand side that is what is happening. So then I use that mineral spirit oil, which is odorless. You can also find it in my materials list, which is linked below. But what that does is it does help prevent some of that sketch look from happening too, without having to apply so many layers or break your hand in the end. And then once you do that, make sure your pencil is nice and sharp, and then you can start to add more details afterwards. And if you are interested in learning to draw pet portraits, feel free to check out the link below. The Learn to Draw Your Own Pet Portraits program. It's 8 weeks long. It's at your own pace, all pre-recorded. I try to make it a little bit more like Netflix style, so you can just click on the video and watch me draw, as well as follow along. And then it's sorted week by week as well, so you don't have to feel rushed to complete 1 week or the next week very fast. Or if you want to finish more than one at a time, you can do that too. But it's really easy to follow along, and it's very, very in-depth. So I highly suggest checking out more of the information by clicking the link below. Continuing on here though, so we're working on the chest area, and this area is just so amazing and beautiful, and I loved how it turned out. But you could see that I am applying different kind of texture and layers depending on the highlights and the lowlights that are being reflected in the fur from the reference image. So I'm kind of adding chunks in some areas and then lightening it up on other areas. Wow, it's almost like a wave effect happening. So that's really important too, is you want to kind of like focus on where is the lighting coming from. That way I can kind of provide that natural reflection from the environment. And so you can really tell that that light blue it really does help a lot for those lighter areas to help emphasize the highlights. Now you don't have to use light blue. If you don't have it, you can use a light pink or just a white color pencil, something that's light enough that can help brighten it up, because with colored pencils you cannot add white on top of dark. It's not like paint. So you just have to play around and make sure that you're leaving room for the highlights ultimately by applying more of the darker colors in the sections that are going to be dark, and then applying some more of the highlights as you're going throughout the process. So you can see that I apply that light blue, not just one time, but I apply it several times to make sure that it's still there as I'm applying darker colors. Now I'm using the Caran d'Ache Luminance series, and that helps a lot more because that one has a little bit more of a waxy coating. And compared to other colored pencils, they're one of the most expensive brands too, but it really does help because it applies a little bit easier on top of other colored pencils. You can also use a slice tool, which is that little tool that I'm using there, to kind of create some little stray hairs here and there. Now you don't want to use it too much, just because it can really make it look a little bit too sketchy or too fake-like. So just only use it when you need to add some stray hairs. Now don't forget the whiskers too. Those are super, super important. But thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to comment down below, and check out the links too if you want to learn more about how to draw.